Have you ever, just stared at a blinking cursor on a blank email draft, knowing you have to write basically the exact same message 50 times today?
Oh, yeah. The absolute worst.
Right. And somehow you have to make every single one sound like you wrote it exclusively for the person reading it. If you're the kind of learner who is, constantly looking for leverage, like a smarter way to operate, the exact tension I'm talking about here.
It's brutal.
It is. It's this soul-crushing, time-consuming grind of manual cold outreach. I mean, you genuinely want to connect with these prospects, but the sheer friction of the initial contact phase just drains the life out of you before the actual conversation even begins.
It's the defining bottleneck in modern sales.
Yeah.
Really in any professional outreach, honestly, whether you're a founder looking for investors or a recruiter hunting for talent.
Yeah, exactly.
The core tension we're looking at in our source material today is this absolute demand for hyper-personalization, but it's just crashing headfirst into the reality of finite time.
Because people are incredibly adept at ignoring generic emails now. If it reads like a blast, it goes straight to the trash.
Right. Your prospects expect you to know who they are. They expect you to know what their specific company does and, what structural problems they might be facing.
Which makes sense.
But if you sit down and thoroughly research every single prospect, look up their recent company news, find their decision makers, and then, handcraft an email that weaves all that context together organically.
You're talking about hours of work.
Hours. Literally hours. For just a handful of emails. What we're exploring today in this deep dive through the lens of a new tool called the Cold Email Template Generator is how we can bridge that massive gap between personalization and scale.
So we're basically looking at how a specific workflow shifts the entire paradigm of how your time is spent.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Because the sources we're looking at specifically target the day-to-day reality of the sales outreach specialist. And before we get into the actual architecture of this software, I think we need to understand the structural problem it's trying to solve.
Right, the root cause.
Yeah. When you look at the daily loop of an outreach specialist, they're essentially trapped in an administrative cycle.
It's a cycle of data acquisition and manual synthesis. I mean, they have to research the prospect, cross-reference that with the product they're selling, write the email, customize the template so it doesn't sound completely robotic.
And then log it.
And then log it, yeah. It's a loop that consumes the vast majority of their working hours.
The best analogy I can think of for this is imagine you're tasked with hosting this massive high-stakes dinner party to network with influential people in your industry.
Okay, I'm with you.
But instead of just throwing the party, you are required to handwrite custom invitations for every single guest. And it's not just calligraphy. Before you can even address the envelope, you have to individually research every guest's biography, their dietary restrictions, where they went to college.
Their recent career achievement.
Exactly, just so you can write a bespoke poem on the inside of the invitation.
Which is an incredible amount of overhead just to get them in the door.
Right. By the time the actual party starts, by the time the guests arrive and it's time to actually network and build relationships, you are completely exhausted.
You're totally burnt out.
You've spent 90% of your energy on the invitation, which takes away from the actual goal, which is interacting with the guests. I mean, in sales, the goal is interacting with the client and closing the deal, not spending 4 hours on LinkedIn trying to figure out if a company has 50 employees or 500.
That analogy perfectly highlights the misallocation of human capital. You're burning your best energy on the prerequisite to the work rather than the work itself. And the promise of this tool, like its core value proposition, is taking over the heavy lifting of that data acquisition and synthesis. It wants to automate the customization of those invitations so the specialist can step away from addressing envelopes and actually host the party.
Which sounds great in a pitch deck, but here's where it gets really interesting for me, because I always want to know the how.
Right.
How does this software actually execute on that promise without just becoming a spam cannon?
Well, the documentation outlines a very specific 8-step workflow. It follows a prospect from being raw data to a fully tracked campaign. So let's look at the starting line. The input.
Okay, yeah. Because what stands out immediately about the input phase is the minimal friction. The documentation states that all the user needs to provide is a prospect list containing just 2 data